Story 1. Sometimes I do, but I mostly appreciate that I got to experience both. Plus, it is pretty sweet to actually know the lyrics to any song. Story 2. I do not miss the days before the internet, but I miss the days before the decline in quality. Story 3. I miss the sweet spot of the early internet, before corporations took over everything. It was a wild, diverse place. Story 4. People's day-to-day joy levels before the internet were significantly higher. Now people seem muted and bored with life because of constant stimulation. At an amusement park the other day, the majority of people were staring at their phones, watching others on a screen instead of looking around and enjoying where they were. Story 5. I miss talking on the phone for hours about nothing. Now people barely text back. Story 6. I think the sweet spot for the internet was the late 1990s and early 2000s. Most people were still on dial-up, which meant you had to log in, do what you wanted, then log off and go do something else. You still had access to electronic mail and could order items online, which was convenient. You had a mobile phone, so you were contactable, but they were basic phones that only handled calls, text messages, and the game Snake. Story 7. I don't miss the days before the internet. I miss the days before social media. Story 8. I am old enough to remember the days before the internet, when it was new and before the social media era. Life was much better then. Story 9. I missed listening to albums from start to finish. I am happy to have rediscovered vinyl at age 64. Story 10. I was a teenager when the internet was made public. It was not a drastic change then, between 1997 and 2005. The biggest change came with social media. I deleted my Facebook account in 2008 and never used another platform, so I am very thankful. I cannot imagine growing up in a world where social media is heavily prioritized. Story 11. I miss the early days of the internet when it was less exploitative and controlled. It was amazing to connect with people around the world about my hobbies and interests. Now it seems like a corporate mind control project. Story 12. The early to mid-1990s were awesome. The internet may have made life worse in general, laughing out loud. Story 13. I had written a long paragraph, but I made myself feel sad. Story 14. I do miss it. Finding information was definitely harder, but I would give it all to go back to 1990. Story 15. Yes. I am a member of Generation X. I refused to get a mobile phone for the longest time because I felt it was a leash. I loved going for walks with no plans and meandering around the city. I would find new places to explore, new shops and restaurants. I loved going to the record store to look for music. You would run into people unexpectedly. Now nothing feels personal. The internet was supposed to open the world to us, but the algorithms work to keep you locked in your own bubble. My husband will turn on navigation to go to the grocery store. I hate it. You do not get the opportunity to experience new things. Plus, people demand everything instantly. You are always at work. People will send email and text messages knowing you are on vacation or out of the office, but they still want a response. Story 16. I miss the time when we used the internet but neither relied on it nor were obsessed with it, up to the third-generation iPhone. Story 17. No, it is a modern Library of Alexandria and has done much to increase human progress. I do miss the days when the internet was not being degraded daily by low-quality content and automated systems. It will be a sad day when it becomes essentially unusable. Story 18. I am 66 and I have learned 80% of all I know from internet research. I am good at finding hard-to-find research, and I would never want to give up the knowledge I have gained. Story 19. I miss it. People were more in the moment then. Now every event is full of people staring at their phones. Sometimes it is nice not to know everything. With the world of information at our fingertips, people seem to have less common sense and reasoning than before. Story 20. I miss those days because I was a kid. Being a kid in the 1980s and 1990s was fucking amazing. I do not mind what the internet has brought to the world, but I would not have wanted it in my life as a child. If any of that makes sense. Story 21. I do not miss being without the internet. I miss the world being normal. I have noticed I like Reddit because it is the most like the good old days of Usenet in 1992. Anonymous and self-organizing. Story 22. Sometimes I do. I miss human interaction, not having everything so readily available, and being unreachable without it being a problem. Story 23. The ability to Google anything is great. Artificial intelligence and social media are awful. Story 24. Honestly, somewhat. I miss being disconnected from everything and being able to read the newspaper after my father or watch the news. Without the internet, I would not have met many people I consider close friends. I am glad I experienced both, but I think the internet could be improved in many ways. Story 25. Before the internet? No, before its mass integration into our daily lives. Yes, it used to be a cool thing you could use to chat with people far away, share information, share files, and play games. Now it controls my television, my tumble dryer, and how accounts for clothing stores or appliance shopping are handled. It has really never been needed for most of the smart devices or apps. Story 26. I often miss the internet as it was before the rise of video and art generated by artificial intelligence. I wonder whether this feeling is similar to the grief people felt for the world before the internet existed. Story 27. I would not say I miss it, but there were perks. I would not want to give up information at my fingertips, but one thing I do miss is being able to leave the house and disconnect from the world. The best you had was a pager. I would play a 90-second music clip on my radio to deter voice messages, all to avoid having to talk or be spoken to. Some people complained the music was too long, but I would tell them to punch in their phone number and I will call them back instead of leaving a voicemail asking me to call at some number. Back then you had to use payphones to check voicemail and you did not always have change on you. Just remembering this is such a trip. Story 28. Sometimes I liked the library and not having everything at my fingertips. Now I only use the library to pick up books to read. Story 29. I started in technology in the 1980s and worked for Bolt, Beranek and Newman and General Telephone and Electronics, among others, during the build-out of what we now call the internet. I think it was all a terrible, inevitable mistake. We have become the Borg, and we have lost a lot of our humanity. Story 30. I miss when the internet was something I could turn on or off or leave. I hate how omnipresent it is and how that has changed our expectations for socialization, work, and more. I also miss true websites. There used to be so many creative sites for many different purposes. Story 31. The Internet 1.0, when intended to be a bastion of human knowledge and communication, was incredible. Web 2.0 was about capitalism crashing the party to extract as much money as possible. It suddenly became focused on electronic commerce. Web 3.0 destroyed the fabric of human social connection and identity. It aimed to extract as much data about us as possible to train artificial intelligence models to replace us. Story 32. I miss the early days of the internet. Felt like an exciting adventure. Now it feels mundane. Story 33. No, I do not have to search the phone book or flip through countless issues of Consumer Reports to figure things out. I can pull up videos showing how to complete any do-it-yourself project or repair. If plants in the garden are looking unhealthy, or if I need to know whether a plant is invasive, a simple search is all it takes. I can easily talk to friends and family not just across the country, but around the world. On the youth side of things, my kids have learned so much, from math lessons to art classes. The internet is what you make of it. Yes, there are horrible parts and brain rot, but it is, frankly, amazing. Story 34. I miss the old internet more than I would miss a world without it. Story 35. I do. Finding people from your past can be a huge mistake. I would go nuts without it now, and it can be convenient. I still miss not feeling so connected. Story 36. In terms of access to information, the internet is incredible. Not getting lost while driving may make all of the rest worthwhile. Currently, I'm not sure the advantages outweigh the negative effects of the internet on culture as a whole. I miss being able to have conversations with people whose eyes are not on a screen. I miss having cogent, thoughtful discussions with humans instead of being presented with memes and pithy false narratives. I sort of miss being forced to leave home to go to work, restaurants, malls, theaters, and Blockbuster. It's as if culture no longer has a marketplace where communities actually gather and interact with people who are not exactly the same. Common experiences are a way to discover how multifaceted we are and what we have in common. I think too much internet has contributed to the current binary perceptions people have of one another, for or against, friend or enemy, and to the sense of isolation many people experience. Story 37. Absolutely not. I miss a lot, but imagine a world without the internet. Story 38. I do not miss the past. I was too young. What I do miss is the early high-speed internet, back when websites were really a thing. The MySpace era felt like the peak of the internet. Social media was still new enough that not everything was overrun with ads. It was a simpler time. Now about 2/3 of what I see is content generated by artificial intelligence. Story 39. I would hate to go back to in-person banking. Having to write and mail checks to pay bills, being unable to check and move my investments at will, doing all shopping in person and not being able to find shoes that fit me, and filling out tax returns by hand. Story 40. The world used to feel so much bigger. I was born in 1986. Story 41. Before the internet, during the bulletin board system era, that was truly elite. Story 42. As someone who lives 5,000 miles away from my family, I appreciate that I can FaceTime them and see them whenever I want. The internet has changed us, and future generations are not as well socialized as we were. When they get bored, they go online and are rarely alone with their thoughts. I wish we could return to how things were socially. Story 43. I miss the golden age of the internet in the early 2000s. Felt pure and full of hope. Story 44. Absolutely. The age of information has diluted people's critical thinking. Story 45. Not really. It is like how my dad did not miss the days before the Rural Electrification Act freed him from living in a world lit only by fire. Story 46. Honestly, no. We tend to get sentimental about the past. But before the internet, the world was slower and much more boring. The amount of time you spent quietly thinking while standing in line or driving somewhere used to frustrate me. If you did not bring a physical book or magazine, you had nothing to do but twiddle your thumbs while you waited. This often led to small talk in situations where today you would both agree you do not want to talk and would just be on your phones. As much as I miss parts of it, we were a generation like no other. We lived in the pre-digital world. The impact of that upbringing is lost on people who grew up more recently. It is something you cannot learn from a book. You could get away with almost anything. With few cameras, most of what we did was not documented. There were regions and entire subcultures you would not have known about unless you were there. There was no way to read about them online or watch videos of friends hanging out as you can today. I remember it being so boring that I would not want to go back. Story 47. The warning, do not believe everything you read online, was common among parents and older people around 1999. It is amazing that they did not follow their own advice. Story 48. I love not having to go to the library for research, but I loathe having Snopes pinned to my taskbar. Story 49. Yes, absolutely. I can't wait to retire and get rid of my smartphone. For me, life was so much better before the internet. Story 50. I miss the days of the internet before social media. That was the pinnacle of human existence. Story 51. I miss the days when I could have a throwdown debate about a disputed fact and the answer was not immediately available in my pocket. I am glad I did not grow up with social media, and I made better use of my time when video streaming was not available. In short, yes. Story 52. Sometimes I want to put all my electronics into a wood chipper. Story 53. If you wanted to communicate with someone, you had to do so in a civil manner. Otherwise, the community you lived in would isolate you. No one knows what courtesy, respect, or rationality mean. Everyone is yelling as if they were commenting on Facebook. Story 54. Yes and no. It was isolating sometimes before we could talk to a larger demographic of people. Story 55. Before the internet, you had to shuffle down to the library to research anything. You hoped the musty old book you checked out was reasonably up to date. Story 56. I still miss GeoCities when the internet was fun, and you could code your own little fan page and tell the world about your obsession. It was the main reason I became a web and graphic designer later in life. Story 57. I do not miss the time before the internet. I miss when the internet was good, informative, and virtually free, before social media, smartphones, algorithms, and search engines optimized by artificial intelligence. I miss the time before everything was monetized with ads and became clickbait. Story 58. No, I'm glad people have the internet, but it has become an addiction I wish they would overcome. Story 59. I miss the world as it was before for other reasons. If we had the internet in the early 1990s, it would have been the same. Story 60. I don't miss hassles like dialing 0 to reach the movie theater, then calling and listening to all the films showing that day just to note the showtime I wanted. Story 61. Yes and no. On the one hand, it kept us active playing outside. We found joy in what we had. We would spend an evening reading a single game magazine, assembling a puzzle, browsing the video store for something random to watch or gaming, and there was never any feeling that we should be doing something else. Now everything is available at your fingertips, and we are spoiled for choice, overexposed, and anxious about our place in life compared with everyone else who seems to have the perfect body, the perfect holiday, the perfect car, and the perfect spouse. On the other hand, the wealth of information on the internet has been a godsend. Company phone numbers are available at a touch, Wikipedia answers every question, and we no longer have to use phone cards to call someone across the globe. The internet is a wonder, but we need to step away from it and learn to exist without it every now and then. Story 62. I miss not being so available. Now the expectation is that you must be available all the time. I hate it. Story 63. I miss the days before the internet. You had to go to the library to get your facts from an encyclopedia. The conspiracy theories your weird uncle shared were only about your family, not the entire world, and you just blew them off. To pass the time, people read books and magazines and did crossword puzzles instead of scrolling through nonsense on their phones. Most people watched the same television shows, so at least you had something that brought people together. We had more of a sense of community. I believe the internet has taken away, let us say, 30% of our intelligence. Why learn anything when you can just get the answer at your fingertips? Okay, I am going to go scream at another cloud now. Story 64. Yes and no. I love the convenience of access to things I enjoy like YouTube, music, and how-to videos, but I miss the pace of life before the internet. I hate feeling the need to justify not answering a text message or phone call. I love not having to go to the library for information. Having such depth of knowledge at my fingertips is something we are incredibly fortunate to have, and the fact that it lives in my pocket is even more amazing. I also enjoy access to maps, but I miss exploring a city with the real fear of getting hopelessly lost. I miss making mixed compact discs for road trips, which we would share afterward. They always reminded us of the trip. I miss people not caring about their image or feeling the need to document everything for followers or profiles. I miss being silly without the fear of it living on the internet forever. Mostly, I think I just miss being younger. The early internet was incredible, a true golden age before influencers and commercial interests, before companies saw dollar signs everywhere. Story 65. I do not miss the days before the internet, but I long for the days before cell phones. People are just addicted to them. Story 66. I miss the internet of the 1990s through the early 2010s. The modern internet is far too corporate and sanitized. It feels like the internet's original spirit no longer exists. A bigger problem is that social media spreads propaganda far more easily than earlier channels, and online dating apps are damaging relationships. People do not communicate properly and often treat partners as temporary, driven by a why should I settle mindset. Story 67. No, I loved the internet. I miss the days before companies discovered the monetary value of user data and everything became spyware. Story 68. I miss the world before internet in your pocket, not the world before the internet. Story 69, kind of, for two reasons. 1. Not being online 24 hours a day was less stressful, and we were less exposed to other people's negative opinions. 2. My family was one of the few at my school with internet access, and I had information technology knowledge, so I was the king of the schoolyard. I had video game cheat codes, digital versatile discs, and music. Story 70. I started college just before widespread internet use, when the idea of influencer began and people started making money on YouTube. Corporations began to take notice. I really wish I had had a fully in-person experience during one of the most formative periods of life. I was addicted to an online role-playing group and spent most of my time on it. People around me were addicted to social media. I also came from a troubled family background. High school was isolating because of rural conservative politics, and I was at odds with it. The early internet was incredibly helpful, but it eventually became a curse. It's so hard to meet new people now. People literally want to doom scroll and rot their brains. Friends usually come from work, parent groups, or college. Holding a conversation is grating with some people because they want to be on their phones. Some teens and children stare blankly as if caught in headlights and treat a single verbal conversation like pushing a boulder uphill. One of the biggest things I miss is that you used to have to suck it up and just do things sometimes. If you promised to meet a friend for dinner but did not feel like it, you still went because flaking was a social sin and you wanted to be a good friend. If you did not want to go to work, you forced yourself because bills had to be paid. Nowadays, boundaries are often treated as permission to be selfish and unreliable without guilt or consequences. Story 71. I miss the early days of the internet with Usenet and small chat rooms. Now everything is spam and slop generated by artificial intelligence. Feels like a void. Story 72. Yes, the internet has mostly been terrible for the world. Propaganda spreads at the speed of light. Story 73. I watched the world adopt the internet in the late 1990s. Personally, I embrace my Generation X side and go without the internet for a few hours each day, usually walking around or sitting in a cafe. Story 74. If you miss those days, just do not use the internet. I, for one, think it is beneficial. Story 75. I miss the early days of the internet when it was pleasant and you could look things up for fun. In my opinion, social media and their algorithms have messed everything up. Now everyone is so angry and mean to each other. Story 76. Yes, the decline in civility in politics is directly tied to the advent of the internet. It may be the undoing of this country. Story 77. The internet of the 2000s to 2010s was good. The technology had advanced enough that it worked well, was not overly complicated, and corporations did not control everything. The current internet is very poor, mainly because of social media, including Reddit. Although we all have access to vast stores of human knowledge, people often seem less informed. Low-quality questions, unproductive arguments, and algorithm-driven content. Many accept it, creating echo chambers, low-quality artificial intelligence content, and misinformation. The concept of reality and truth is eroding. I do not envy people born today. They are likely to be less informed because of these trends. Story 78. As I get older, I find myself missing the days gone by. Story 79. I miss the early days of the internet. It was brilliant. There were communities in every corner of the web, enthusiasts for everything you could imagine. Websites were run by real people who loved providing a service. Today, the internet feels small. It is run by faceless corporations and tech bros who use it to push their twisted worldviews, including Reddit. It is disappointing to see what it has become, yet here we are, addicted. Story 80. I miss the days when the internet felt like a frontier rather than the curated mess it is today. Before social media, tight-knit communities formed and you could get to know people personally on a chat or message board. Now it is mostly giant platforms like Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube, where content creators and clickbait dominate and your personal wedding videos can be taken down because a copyrighted song plays in the background for a few seconds. Story 81. I miss waking up and looking at the world instead of at my phone. I can barely remember what that felt like. Story 82. I miss not knowing things until we watched the news at night. Story 83. I definitely miss those days. People felt more alive, happy, and thriving. Now everyone is a shut-in. No one trusts each other, no one can take a joke, and no one understands the art of sarcasm. I do not think the internet has done the world any favors. It has Mainly increased surveillance. Before the internet, you did not hear about people having their bank accounts wiped out or being taken for everything they were worth. People were more open and honest then. I think the internet has made the world a crueler place to be. Story 84. Do I still miss the days before? I did not miss them in 1998, 2007, or 2014. I began to miss them when Donald Trump was first elected president. Now I miss the time before the internet. Story 85. What we have now is infinitely more convenient. If I want any grocery in the world, I can generally get it affordably. I can navigate a new city or a foreign language or country with my phone. I can make friends around the globe and conduct business across the country. As an actor, I can work a job and do auditions on my own time instead of cramming them in between day jobs and hoping I do not get fired. Uber, DoorDash, voice navigating maps, translate, email, online bill payments, investing, instant information, showtimes, concert information, and publishing a book are all easier, more accessible, and make life better. I do miss things. Little moments were nice, like when a friend would just show up at your door to say hi. Now you have to send a text before you call and ask if you can come over. I miss when politics were less vicious and when you did not fear internet backlash. I miss prioritizing time with friends and playing games together, with less fear of people around you and the freedom to ride a bike or go somewhere. It did not feel like strangers were living a large part of life away from computers. You generally had to be social to get by. Story 86. I am thankful for the creation of the internet every day. Since I started using it, my earning potential has skyrocketed and it has helped me immensely. Story 87. Yes, life was more carefree for the most part, at least from my perspective. Story 88. The internet has made us both smarter and more foolish. Facts and fictions are a simple search away, and we are often unable to tell which is which. This is part of the reason we have Trump in office. Story 89. Hell yeah. I've been here all day and night, writing at length about how much better things were before the internet. It was not all bad, but it should have stayed the way it was in the 2000s. Story 90. I miss being one country, the United States of America. People did not hate one another like they do now, because there was no internet or social media to divide us. Back then, there were Republicans, Democrats, and a few independents. They disagreed on policy but did not despise or revile one another. They were still able to get along and in Congress get things done for the good of the country. Even during the Vietnam War, rancor and hatred did not reach the levels we see among Americans today. The internet was supposed to unite the world, but it has done the opposite. Story 91. That period from the time digital subscriber line replaced dial-up to the birth of Facebook was a blast. But considering where it has led us, I would love to go back to the before times. Story 92. Yes, because social media has brought the air holes out of the woodwork. Story 93. I loved it for a while, but now I would flip a switch to turn the whole thing off. Story 94. I grew up in the 70s and 80s when computers were considered only for nerds. Nobody cared about computers, and if you did, you were labeled a nerd. I hoped that someday everyone in the world would come to appreciate and love computers as I do. Today, the internet has largely made that happen. The irony is that the world has reshaped computers into things people love for very different reasons than I did. Still, seeing people enjoy different aspects of computers and what the internet has made possible in their lives is satisfying. To some extent, everyone loves computers, as I always have. I started programming at the age of 8 in the 70s. It has both good and bad sides, but that is life. I do not miss the earlier days because now everyone has joined me where I started. Story 95. The internet? Not at all. Social networks? Absolutely yes. At the beginning, the original Facebook was about university parties and getting in touch with the person you met at a party the night before. It was fun, useful, and I would say rather functional. Story 96. The internet was fine. The era of smartphones has ruined almost everything by causing a steady decline in quality. Story 97. God. No. The world is significantly better today than it was in previous decades, regardless of how much we miss the charming technology. Story 98. I miss the days when only nerds and hobbyists were online. When ordinary users started using it, companies followed. and now it is a wet noodle. They could not handle it and are now social media zombies. Story 99. Yes. I miss writing and receiving letters. I had loads of pen pals when I was a kid and always wrote to family who lived far away. Getting letters made my day. They were always stuffed with photos, stickers, or a 5-pound note if you were lucky. If friends went to university, you wrote letters and saved your change for long phone calls. Everyone had a shoebox of letters and photos. The first few years of the internet in the early 1990s were magical. I remember being enthralled by chat rooms. I met my first boyfriend online. People thought that was completely wild back then. I think social media ruined it. A quick text chat is not the same as letter writing. Story 100. I miss the simplicity and the culture, and the fact that people communicated more easily and were not so distracted. However, the internet has provided many conveniences that make some things much easier. Story 101. I have missed the pre-social media internet since about 2008. Everything feels worse now. We are all connected, but are we happier? I used to feel the grass was greener in other countries, but the internet has made everything seem the same and non-exotic. That illusion matters. There are sunny days when any place in the world can be truly beautiful. The internet cannot take that away, but it has diminished the sense that other countries are different and exotic. I miss daydreaming about things I did not know. It feels like we have been exposed to everything. Story 102. I honestly miss the internet as it was in the early 1990s, when you had to know what an address used by the transmission control protocol and the internet protocol was and what the domain name system was to get online. Only scientists and nerds used it, and Usenet was like Reddit. Then the internet gave rise to America Online, which led to Facebook, and September never ended. Story 103. I think the biggest change was the pre- and post-smartphone eras, not the internet per se. With my phone, the entire knowledge of the internet is with me wherever I am. I can manage my finances, get updated directions, and know which routes to take or avoid to get there fastest. I have entertainment wherever I am. I can stay in contact with people and speak face-to-face if I want. If I feel unsafe, a friend can track my location to help me get home. I can get updates from my doctor, check my calendar, keep my shopping list, and turn up the heating before I get home. Social media has caused more harm to children and contributed to lifelong problems more than any other invention. This is ironic because it was designed to help people meet. My phone also has a flashlight, although it is a poor one. Story 104. I don't really miss it, but I feel sorry for my kids because they never got to experience it. Story 105. There are obvious advantages to having full internet access, but they do not outweigh the harms. Social media has more negative consequences than benefits. Misinformation is rampant, and targeted news contributes to increasing bias. It's too easy for people with mental health issues to find harmful outlets. It also gives everyone an excuse to be on their phones constantly, which I hate, especially for children. Story 106. Yes and no. I miss the privacy, but I am a knowledge junkie and love having the answers to my questions at my fingertips instead of spending hours or days looking for them. Story 107. Yes. I miss the connections with friends and family I had as a child, playing on the vacant lot and sitting in the garage with my dad, uncle, cousin, and grandpa. I would not have those things today in the same way, and as I approach grandparent age, I will never know the experience my dad and grandpa had, so I cannot truly miss it. That said, I am certain I am worse off for having missed it. Story 108. Yes. The world felt smaller. You did not discuss politics and religion in polite company. You were not inundated with everyone's outrage. You were blissfully unaware of the latest drama in a city on the other side of the country. News was simple, boring, and fact-based, not the rage bait slop that every media outlet shoves down our throats every day. The political right and the political left feel like the same garbage now. People call to share good or bad news in their lives, and you talked about it. You did not have to effectively stalk your friends to know what was happening in their lives. You had to make real connections and interact with real people, not the fake personas people put on Instagram. A relationship required active effort. You could not just click follow and scroll past their updates every now and then. There was civility in how most people treated each other. Sure, there were assholes, but that was what they were, assholes. You could avoid them and never have to see them again. The internet gave us many things, and some are great, but it also took much from us. And no, the irony of posting this on Reddit is not lost on me. Story 109. Yes, I love the conveniences and that I can find the answer to any question in seconds. But the internet has made people more vulnerable to manipulation, reduced attention spans, and left many socially inept. I may be an old woman yelling at clouds, but I think the old ways were better. Maybe as a society we will learn to keep the good and discard the bad. Story 110. From the internet to mobile phones, there was a balance between entertainment and usefulness, just enough to feed individual habits. Now we are all addicted. Story 111. Sometimes I miss the simplicity of life and the feeling of not constantly needing to look at something. Having information at your fingertips is very valuable too. Story 112. Not particularly about me, but I do really miss seeing kids playing outside these days. Story 113. More every day. The older I get, the more I think that all the internet has done is allow all the world's village idiots to get together and reinforce each other's beliefs. It used to be that if you had a question of fact, you could look it up in an encyclopedia that had a strong financial incentive to be as accurate as possible. Now the financial incentive is not to be accurate but to be divisive, to generate clicks, traffic, and ad revenue. So basic questions of fact become a matter of opinion, which does us all a disservice because then things that really matter get decided not by the person most informed or capable, but by the loudest. Story 114. No. Even during the broadband era, the internet was not convenient. You needed laptops and internet cafes when you were outside. The iPhone 3 was the true game changer, bringing mobile convenience, and that is when the problem started. Story 115. I did not have regular internet access until college, and I do not miss those earlier days. Story 116. Absolutely. I look forward to the counter-technology movement. Story 117. Yes and no. I was severely bullied as a child and abused by my parents. When the internet came around, it gave me a chance to meet people from many walks of life who did not know me, so I could be anyone, someone who was not abused or bullied. I loved it. But now that I am older, I hate how it has taken over society. It has gone too far. Story 118. Yes, I miss how it used to be. I am sad my son did not get to experience it. But I am also thankful for technology. Story 119. I was in my early 20s when the internet was heating up. Before the internet and before cell phones, you had to go out and meet people, talk in person or over the phone. We read more books and watched more movies. When you ran into someone by chance, it had meaning. Now we have too much information and too many distractions. Story 120. Honestly, I do. Access to information is good, but much of what came with it is not. Story 121. Yes, but I cannot go back to being ignorant anymore. Story 122. The 1990s through the early 2000s were very fun and exciting. That is all I will say. Story 123. It was neat at first. Then it became ordinary, and I could see it taking more than it gave. Story 124. Many people confuse missing their younger years with believing the world was less connected. When it comes to global communications and information sharing, the last 35 to 40 years have arguably been the fastest period of progress we have seen. In the 60 years before that, from the 1920s through the 1980s, access to near-instant information sharing via phone calls and fax spread to most of the planet. Major events once took a week to reach the masses. They began to reach people within a day or two. From the 1980s to the 2020s, accessibility became essentially global, with hundreds of millions or even billions of people having immediate access to social media platforms. Nearly anything that happens on the planet can be communicated to billions within minutes. Do I miss it? Not really. I have always been somewhat of a news and current events junkie, and I have a knack for not letting completely outlandish events that I have no control over affect me very much. Story 125. On balance, no. You can look up tutorials on YouTube, use chat generative pre-trained transformer to answer problems, find a community, have instant free communication with people on the other side of the world, and never miss a television show. There are many benefits. However, the problems cannot be ignored. Social media, attacks on net neutrality, artificial intelligence and bots, too much dependence on a handful of corporations such as Amazon Web Services, and excluding those who lack a reliable connection are all real concerns. Story 126. I have never missed the days before the internet. I was using disk operating system on the first computers. The internet is fabulous. The companies running it are not so much. Do not be evil, Google. Oops, too late. Story 127. It is much easier and more convenient to find the items you want to buy, and to do so from almost anywhere. Imagine you cannot preview a new album, movie, or product and must drive to multiple stores to have any chance of finding what you were looking for. Story 128. I missed the days before social media. The internet was fine. Story 129. I certainly do not miss having to go to libraries and books to do research. I also do not like how easy it is to print anything and make it sound factual regardless of its veracity. Story 130. Frequently, there are good things on the internet, such as social interactions, but I believe there are far more harmful aspects at many levels. Story 131. I wish we could have stopped around Napster, America Online Chat, and Yahoo Maps. That was before things got crazy, when technology only added convenience. Story 132. I miss the early internet before it all declined. There were always bad parts, but what I miss more is that era's spirit, before the commodification of attention and before Google turned search engine optimization into a tool that worked against quality. It used to be a lot more fun. Story 133. It was easier to enjoy people when I didn't know every single opinion they had. Story 134. No, not at all. The internet brought me games, adult content, friends, and good times. Story 135. I miss it being hard to get on the internet, so at least the dumbest people online had to make an effort to get there. Story 136. I am glad the embarrassing things I did in my teenage years are not on social media. Story 137. The thing I miss most is living without mobile phones. It was nice that once you left the house you were unreachable. No one could bother you. They could only leave a message on your home answering machine, which you might receive hours or days later. Now everyone is on a digital leash 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Story 138. We knew many of the things that could go wrong because company leadership always prioritized short-term profit. Story 139. The internet can be useful and informative, and online games can be enjoyable. However, we would be better off if harmful, toxic platforms such as social media and OnlyFans were permanently removed. The spread of misinformation and the ease with which people are influenced by online content are also serious problems. Story 140. I don't know, man. Does a river stone miss the waters that rushed by it yesterday? Story 141. The internet, before it became corporatized, was a wonderful thing. Story 142. Man, the internet has just improved everything. The sweet spot was somewhere between dial-up and social media. Story 143. I don't miss it for myself, but I wish everyone could try it. We spend so much of our lives tethered to phones and computers now. People should have that opportunity. Story 144. I loved the time before the internet, but I also loved the early internet. It would have been perfect if Facebook and the sewer of social media that followed had not happened. So yes, it was great before 2006. Story 145. I miss the days when you could walk away from technology and be free. Now it is such a huge part of my life that I find it difficult to disconnect. Story 146. With the internet, I am in more constant contact with my friends than my parents were before the internet. I envy the quality of time my parents and their friends spent together. They were not distracted by phones, were fully present, and made time to be with the person they were visiting. Story 147. No, because they were very boring. You could not coordinate well with friends and often missed being able to see them. But there were a lot of nice things about it that we do not get today. For example, people were much less grumpy or offensive in public. The way people speak to each other and to service professionals today is far more egocentric. Also, it was less strange to just show up somewhere and see if you fit in. Story 148. Yes and no. I was always mesmerized by the internet growing up as it slowly became a household staple. and I still use it constantly. On the other hand, I miss simpler times like meeting friends in person to do things. Playing video games with friends was almost always a blast. Sitting around a television, cracking jokes and teasing each other. What I miss most is when it was not commonplace to have a cell phone. I appreciate the convenience of having one, but it would now feel like an inconvenience not to have one because we are accustomed to them. It was nice not being tethered to everyone and everything around the clock. You could go on vacation with family, friends, or loved ones and be effectively off the grid, even in a major city. That is impossible these days, and I do not think the younger generation will ever truly understand that level of freedom because they will never get to experience it. I watch my son get dismissed from school for snow or other weather, and then have to be cooped up in his room on a Chromebook anyway. When I was a kid, a snow day was magical. We woke up, realized we did not have to go to school, bundled up, and played in the snow all day. Sledding, snowball fights, building igloos, and so on. I have played in the snow with him several times, but it is just not the same. He will never get to experience an old-school snow day. This does not even touch on the days before social media, which only compounds the issue. Story 149. When I was growing up, my grandparents often said that life had been simpler when they were young. Looking back, I agree. But with the advent of the internet, life has accelerated and everything feels like it is on fast forward. Each generation seems to have lost the experience of being free from electronics and of relying on common sense. Story 150. I first got internet access when I was about 12, so it felt natural to integrate into my life. My dad had to do extra work from home and needed the internet, so we got dial-up as soon as it was available. I was more creative when I was young. Now I'm in my 40s. I don't really regret the internet, though. Story 151. I would not say I miss those days, but I definitely have fond memories of that era. There was a mystery to everything that really cannot be replicated in the internet, the global positioning system, and the world of artificial intelligence. Until recently, it felt like everything was consistently getting better, but the competency crisis is 100% real, and for the first time in my life, I am apprehensive about how the current and next generations are interacting with and using technology. Story 152. Yes, but not for any specific reason. The world has gotten progressively worse every year since I was born. I cannot think of a single time when things actually improved for anyone except the super rich. Story 153. I love the internet. I was a fairly early adopter. If I want to unplug, I do. It is very cleansing to go camping or hiking without electronics, although I have not gone backpacking recently. Story 154. There was a whole internet era before companies such as Amazon and Facebook figured out how to monetize it. A quirky, anti-establishment subculture defined that era. Story 155. It was nice when everyone was not so immediately triggered about everything. Story 156. Yeah, you could make plans a week in advance and people would show up. Getting home and checking your messages was cool. There was never any stress about not being available. Going to the video store was half the fun. You knew 30 phone numbers by heart. Going outside and simply seeing who was around was a blast. Early console gaming felt magical. Blasting a new album on a real stereo was special. Culture existed mostly by word of mouth. Story 157. The world before the internet was awesome. I would choose having to look things up in books at the library over this hellscape any day. Story 158. Yes and no. The way people lived was better, but unlimited information and access to people are wonderful. Social media is not good. Story 159. I miss it when buffering was just what I did after eating too much. Story 160. I would go back in a heartbeat. There have been too many soul-crushing trade-offs for convenience. The biggest cliff we fell off was in 2010. Smartphones and social media changed everything for the worse. I have been teaching since 1998. I hate what these companies have done to children. Story 161. Increasingly, it is clear that humans are not meant for this world. Story 162. Yes. I miss family time and newspapers in the morning, phone calls and the proper way the telephone was answered, not knowing the answer to things right away, and being able to sit with my thoughts. There are too many to list. Story 163. One thing I have noticed is that traveling to foreign countries has become much less of an adventure. I remember flying into Thailand in the early 2000s with only an address for my hostel and a hope that my driver knew the way. A decade or two later, I got a subscriber identity module card at the airport and booked an Uber. The same goes for getting around a city. I no longer get lost. I just go with it because Google Maps brings me to my exact destination. It feels like some lost adventure potential. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.